All right, we are live. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. My name is Wojciech, and today's topic is Amazon Pinpoint, and we are still in the series of AWS Messaging Services. Give me a shout out on the chat if you are hearing me well, if you can see me. I hope that everything is fine. And in the meantime, I will follow up with a regular introduction. So we are finishing the AWS Messaging series. It's almost the last episode. Today's topic is Amazon Pinpoint. It's a little bit unusual service that we will cover today because in the past we covered SNS, SQS, and similar services. And messaging services are not exactly the category that it's explicitly related with Amazon Pinpoint, if you will think about it. But there are some similarities that we will cover today. Next episode will be in 1 week on 8th of September. Today is the first day at school. So in 1 week we will conclude the whole series with the last episode about Kinesis video streams, in particular signaling channels. So let's sum up the goals. This is a live stream format, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask them on the chat. I will be happily answering them. Also, this is a deep dive into the AWS Messaging Services series. So my goal is to highlight the proper use cases and differences between the services, but also I challenge myself to teach you about things you didn't know in the first place existed about that particular service. And Pinpoint is a very interesting example because many of you probably haven't heard or haven't used that service, and that is a pretty interesting service to be analyzed, especially in the context of messaging services. So without further ado, let's dive into the exact specification. Amazon Pinpoint is basically a fully managed customer engagement platform. And by customer engagement platform, I mean that it's designed to manage targeted and transactional multi-channel engagement and communication using email, push notifications, SMSs, and also AWS Lambda connectivity. It allows us to understand and engage via multiple channels customers by sending them personalized, timely, and relevant communications based on the segmentation or based on the targeted behavior that we described inside the tool. It is designed to deliver marketing messages for segmented audience, doing templating and personalization, doing campaigns, and designing journeys. We will talk about all of those terms in details in a moment, but this is a high-level overview of what the service is. If you have used Amazon Pinpoint in the past, please let me know in the chat because I will be extremely interested to hear your thoughts about it. As usually, we will have 3 parts. First one is about architecture. We will do a high-level overview, introduce all building blocks. We will talk about integrations and use cases. Then we will talk about operations, high availability, scalability, pricing, and security. And last but not least, we will talk about best practices, how to choose between those services and how to integrate this particular service with the whole AWS ecosystem. As usually, I need to do a disclaimer. By any means, Amazon Pinpoint is not an open source technology. So if you will have any questions regarding internals, how it's designed, how it's built internally, probably we will need to speculate and do educated guesses. However, AWS documentation is pretty solid in all technical and user guides aspects. So let's start with the architecture and high-level overview. On the very high level, we are basically having a managed tool that allows you to audit and prepare the audience management for your marketing or sales campaigns. You can also design all those campaigns and journeys inside this tool. deliver transactional messaging, and schedule those deliveries over multiple channels, and then gather the data about events and also interactions with those campaigns, but also with events in general inside your application, like mobile application, web applications. Basically, you can get information about customer and usage data via the SDK integrations. And then you can export that to other services like Amazon S3, Amazon Personalize, and so on and so on. On a very high level, the main building block is audience, and it's basically a bounded set of all of users. We call users, but we mean message recipients. Next building block is an endpoint. Endpoint is a destination that you can send a message, such as email address, phone number, mobile device. Each user can be associated with one or multiple endpoints. So endpoints can be managed in 1 to n manner. Additional building block is a channel. It represents a platform that through we will engage our audience segment with messages. For example, we will send push notifications to users of our applications, and in order to do that, we must have a Pinpoint project where the push notification channel is enabled. When it comes to the supporting channels, Pinpoint supports push notification, emails, SMS, voice, and custom channels. But there's one caveat regarding custom channel. There's no reliability guarantee in comparison to the other available channels. Next building block is a segment. It is basically a subset of your audience that can share certain attributes. An attribute is basically something that you associate with a particular user. For example, a customer that uses a version 2.0 of your Android app, on their Android device. So attributes in this sense are customers, version of the application, the fact that he's using that application, and also the device type. There are two types of segments that you can create in Pinpoint. First things first is the dynamic segment, which is the ability to create something that will be changing over time. So you can define a dynamic segment for all of your Android users, and any user that will appear after and for example, somebody will install application on their Android phone and will be associated as an existing user, then it will be associated with this dynamic segment. So it means that those segments fluctuate over time and they can be adjusted depending on the attributes that are locked to a particular audience member. The second type of segment is an imported segment, and this one is also called static because they are created outside of Pinpoint and they are saved in the CSV or JSON format, and they are never changing. So when you are creating a new segment, you can use an imported one as a base, and then you can refining this segment by adding filters to create it as a more dynamic one. In this sense, imported segment is, for example, an information from related to export from your other systems. Another building block that is worth mentioning is a campaign, and it's a messaging initiative that engages a specific audience segment. Basically, inside a campaign, we are sending the tailored messages according to a schedule that we are defining. So campaign is one or multiple messages sent to the endpoints and to a specific audience segment and to their endpoints. Another building block is a journey, and this is a customized multi-step engagement experience. When you are creating a journey, you are starting by choosing a segment that defines which customers will participate in that journey, and after that you are adding activities that customers are passing through on their journeys. Activities can be something like sending messages, splitting customers into groups based on their attributes or behaviors. For example, if user clicked this particular push notification, he will be associated with another group that will go via different path through their customer journey. And the similarity with the exact customer journey idea from the user-centered design and general sales management processes is very good approximation of what the journey is. Another building block is a template. A message template is basically a content and settings that you can create, save, and reuse for the messaging purposes inside Pinpoint. When you are creating a template, you are specifying the content that you want to reuse in various components, and when you have that content and settings, you can, based on that template, send particular messages to your users. And last but not least, building block called event. Amazon Pinpoint can accept stream events related with engagement and application usage data. So if you will integrate the Amazon Pinpoint SDK with your application, like mobile app or web app, and you will send all those event data from your user behavior, you will be able to both annotate the user with proper attributes, but also associate certain user behaviors with your audience. And that will give you more detailed information about how users are behaving and how they are reacting over time and processes. You can also store those events for further analysis and integrations with other systems like AWS, Personalize, or something else. So I know that we introduced a lot of different building blocks and terms, and here is an example and description how those terms are mapping to each other. So starting from the left, we do have an audience that is marked with a red border, and we do have 4 users inside that audience. A segment is basically a subset that shares a particular attribute. In our case, I mark this as a green border with the attribute for Android users. Then one particular user inside that segment can have multiple endpoints that will be available to message. In this case, we have endpoint for email and phone notifications, push notifications. Then those users can generate events, and those events will be stored inside Pinpoint. Inside Pinpoint, we can also have those segments defined, and we can send campaigns or set up journeys for those segments up front. Then when we are setting up a campaign, we are choosing a user template and channels over which we will deliver that particular user template. And then Pinpoint is responsible for a message delivery to that particular users inside the segment and to their endpoints. You can also choose dynamic scheduling and channel overrides, like if somebody is using email as a channel, please select this as a primary way of communication. If not, use the push notification as a fallback, and so on and so on. You can also specify the localization templates. If you know that your customer base is using different languages, you can send, for example, in English language to your English-based customer base, or inside Polish customer base, you can send a translated push notification to Polish language to engage them in a much better way. So all those terms are actually overlapping, and they are used as a whole in order to deliver the whole experience related with Amazon Pinpoint. And I must admit that this particular service is not a typical one when it comes to the AWS, because it's more like software as a service solution. And by software as a service, I mean literally as something that you are buying as a whole package that is built in as a full-blown solution to solve a particular problem. An alternative can be, for example, to use Eloqua or HubSpot or anything similar like this. But in terms of AWS and Amazon Pinpoint, you do have unique selling points when it comes to the both transactional messaging and also capabilities when it comes to scalability. And we will talk about this in a moment. When it comes to the use cases, I already covered some of them. First things first, definitely marketing messages on a huge scale. If you are in need to deliver a lot of marketing messages to your customer base, and we are talking about thousands, millions, and so on, that's definitely a way to do it. If you need to send transactional messages or any kind of bulk communication, that's also the case and very good use case for Amazon Pinpoint. Another example is to build customer engagement campaigns in a programmatic way. If you would like to do a very refined and semi-automatic or automatic process for customer engagement campaigns, Amazon Pinpoint is also a good service to do it. Additionally, they are very good in doing omni-channel campaign management. Omni-channel in this sense means that you are covering multiple channels when it comes to the message delivery. So for example, you can target customers that are using tablet, phone, and PC, for example, and to target them on multiple channels as one. And last but not least, you can employ the power of AWS to do additional stuff like analytics and data analysis, personalization, and doing a precise targeting mechanisms. When it comes to the companies that are using the Pinpoint, there are a few good examples on the service webpage, but I would like to focus on 4 of those. First things first, Care Connectors. It's a healthcare service organization that uses mobile applications and web apps, and they are heavily relying on Amazon Pinpoint in order to deliver to huge customer base and multiple segments on a daily basis. Another great example is Snack, which is the online snack retailer delivery. And that's another example for a pretty significant customer base and very real-time communication over multiple channels. Another great example is Game Time. So it's a company responsible for events management and ticketing. Once again, huge use case for real-time communication and segmented customer base. And last but not least, some of tech people probably know what the service it is. Coinbase, which is the cryptocurrency platform. And once again, it's a very good example to deliver timely and relevant communication over multiple channels, especially via push notifications, because they are having a very interesting mobile application. So that's all about the high-level overview and architecture part. Let's move to the operations. And once again, as a fully managed service and more like software as a service solution that we are buying as a package as a whole, in this case, when we talk about high availability and scalability, we do not have a lot to talk about because Amazon Pinpoint as a software as a service product is a fully managed service, so you don't have to care about high availability as a thing inside managing AZs, provisioning, and so on and so on. The one thing that you should remember about is the regional disaster recovery, but that's the common pattern for all those fully managed services on the AWS side, because in most cases, those services are region specific. When it comes to the scalability, Amazon Pinpoint scaled automatically based on the needs and required volume. And as I said, there is no need for capacity planning nor provisioning, nothing like that. It's a very good example of a service that you are buying as a whole complete solution in a software as a service manner. also called fully managed service. When it comes to the pricing part, here it gets very interesting. So obviously there's a free tier, and yeah, that's almost the common theme for all services. However, there are some charges that are related with the pay-as-you-go manner, but there are some optional ones that you are paying on a monthly basis and for the constant manner. And I will explain this. So when it comes to the pay-as-you-go, basically you are sending messages, and both for pricing and rates can vary by channel. So you can send more push notifications than SMSs, obviously, but you are paying not for a fixed quota, but for the exact amount of used resources. Then you are paying for monthly targeted audience, which is again calculated based on the amount of endpoints that you are sending to. And last but not least, you are paying for the events collected and how many of those will be collected by the backend. So here is pretty easy to think about and reason about, because the more we will use, the more we will pay. But here, additionally, we do have those optional charges. And those charges are pretty interesting from a different perspective, because they are a fixed fees that you need to pay on a monthly basis. What are the examples? A great one is a dedicated IP address for email sending and email marketing. Additional example, dedicated shortcode for SMSs. If you would like to do phone number validation when you need bidirectional communication, then that's another optional charge that you need to pay. And last but not least, if you would like to have a full deliverability dashboard for your email marketing, you will need to pay a constant fee, monthly one, which is equal to $1,250 per month, in order to have access to that deliverability dashboard. And I'm not talking about just the soft bounces versus hard bounces versus deliveries. I'm talking literally about the full-blown analytics about your email deliverability. So if you need more than just soft versus hard bounces and information about how many messages were delivered successfully, but you would like to have an open rates, how much of that open rates is related with just clicking and closing, and how much is that related with reading half of the email, full email, and so on and so on. What about attachments? What about the open rates for the different hours, and so on and so on? That's what the deliverability dashboard is, and that's why you are paying a much more than just the pay-as-you-go fee. However, that's a constant fee, so the more messages you are sending, the least expensive this particular option is, because it basically amortizes over time. So that's something that is very interesting for companies that are having huge transactional email campaigns, and they are paying already huge amount of money to other providers to have deliverability dashboard and statistics, and also ability to verify those facts and send those amount of messages. I should mention that in the beginning, but in general, Amazon Pinpoint uses both SNS and SES, so simple email service, for delivering messages to both SMSs, push notifications, and sending emails. So do not confuse using SNS with sending emails, because that's a totally different service responsible for that on AWS platform. For transactional mass email marketing, you should probably use and look for simple email service instead of simple notification service. SNS as a service itself is focused on delivering small amount of emails that are related with notifications and programmatic way of notifying other subscribers and channels. If you would like to communicate with your real email marketing members, you should probably use SES. When it comes to the security, once again, we are using a fully managed service, so we are relying on what is available for us on the AWS side. And obviously, it supports encryption address with the AWS KMS service and AWS managed keys. One caveat is that there is no support for customer managed keys, at least for now. And for many companies, that is not a problem, but maybe you will consider this as a thing. Additionally, it leverages encryption in transit by enforcing anywhere communication over HTTPS via TLS and SSL. And the whole service is compliant with various standards, including such robust and demanding standards like HIPAA for healthcare, or several ISO standards, and many, many others. So if you are interested in using Pinpoint, but you are a regulated industry, have a look on it in the first place and try to search for the compliance page for that particular service, because there is a very high probability that it's already compliant with what you need and what you want. And that's all regarding the operational part. So that's everything what I prepared. Let's quickly move to part 3 when we cover best practices. And first things first, let's compare those services between each other and tell what are the real use cases for Amazon Pinpoint. And here's the biggest misconception that we will have in our list. Amazon Pinpoint versus Amazon SNS. I already partially explained that, but let me reiterate over it. Amazon Pinpoint is recommended when you need a mass and transactional messaging to the customer via conventional channels, like with analytics, personalization, tailoring, translations, and anything that relates to audience segmentation. And if you would like to deliver especially email marketing, Amazon Pinpoint is the way to go. If you would like to send Amazon email marketing with Amazon SNS, you're probably aiming at the wrong service, because you should look more to Amazon SES. SNS has an option to send emails. However, as I said earlier, the main purpose of the email notifications for SNS is to deliver them to a limited subset of recipients and types of recipients. What I mean by that is that they will sending the emails in a very limited factor and limited way, like sending the text-based emails or sending the JSON inside an email, and so on and so on. So the main purpose is to notify in a programmatic way our subscribers. For Amazon Pinpoint, from the other hand, we will do a full-blown email marketing, which is desired and designed for real humans. Underneath, Amazon Pinpoint uses SES, so simple email service from AWS, but we don't have to deal with all those low-level stuff. We can rely on a Pinpoint as a service itself. And then all those other services that we covered in the past, they are pretty distinguishable from Amazon Pinpoint. Difference between Pinpoint and SQS is pretty obvious, and I don't think that there is a need to explain it even more than just what is available on the slide. If you need queues, use SQS. If you need email marketing or transactional customers engagement platform, use Pinpoint. Similarly for Pinpoint versus MQ. MQ is a totally different service from Amazon Pinpoint, and it should be pretty easy to distinguish use cases. Similarly, Pinpoint versus Kinesis data streams. You can use Kinesis data streams to, for example, consume messages and then target them to Amazon Pinpoint. By messages, I mean obviously events that are coming from multiple click streams and multiple clients and customers. However, integration is a little bit tricky and it's not as seamless as it should be. Nevertheless, if you need to choose between those two services, it should be pretty obvious how to choose between them in a proper way. Another example, Amazon Pinpoint versus Amazon EventBridge. Very different services, it should be pretty easy to distinguish. Similarly, Pinpoint versus Managed Streaming for Kafka. Totally different ones. Again, Pinpoint versus IoT Message Broker. I'm pretty sure you will be able to distinguish between those two services as well without my help, because those are pretty different ones. Amazon Pinpoint versus AWS AppSync. Is it different? A lot. If you need GraphQL, you are using AppSync. If you need email marketing and customer engagement, you are using Pinpoint. And by that, we basically covered all those choices between different services that we already covered during our series about messaging services. Let's focus right now on integrations and examples how we can integrate with multiple other AWS-based services. So first things first, I explained that Amazon Pinpoint has an SDK, and this SDK is dedicated for mobile and web applications to actually integrate with the event processing and sending events to the Pinpoint itself as a service. I see that there is a question on the chat. Flashpoint asks, so which service should I use when I want to send push notifications from my backend to Android and iOS devices? Well, that's a good question. So if you need to send those push notifications in one way and you don't need to track the analytics part and you don't need to track deliveries and you don't want to engage with the users in more complicated ways than you just sending messages, you are probably safe to use SNS. However, if you would like to have something related with marketing, with targeting, and investigating how much of those push notifications were delivered successfully and clicked, then you will need Pinpoint, because you will need integration with the backend and also telemetry for events and event data that we described inside Pinpoint. So in this particular example, I would say that everything depends on what you would like to do with those informations after sending a push notification. If you are doing fire and forget and you don't care about deliverability and what will happen after you send that message, you are probably safe to use SNS. If you need more and you would like to, for example, track the clicks or engage in something more complicated than just sending this message, and for example you would like to wait for the click, you would like to react if user was not weren't clicking on that particular push notification, then you need Pinpoint. So I would distinguish those two services depending on the outcome that you would like to do on the client side. I hope that answered your question, Flashpoint. Another integration, Amazon Lex, is a very good example that you can rely on having chatbot and also integrate with the event data and informations that are stored, that are produced by the users of that chatbot. Another example is using Amazon Connect. For those of you who haven't heard about Amazon Connect, is basically a programmatic call center that you can set up inside Amazon. And by call center, I mean literally features like IVR, so having the menu, which is available over the DTMF codes and so on and so on. And you should be able to set up such call center and also relay those phone calls to the real users as well. But at the end, you can also generate events to Amazon Pinpoint and integrate it as a whole process. And then, for example, send a push notification after a phone call with survey that says, were you satisfied from that particular phone call? Please give us the information and ratings about that particular customer support call. Another example for a very good integration is to use of the service called Amazon Personalize. And it's another fully managed service that delivers the ability to send to infer and build recommendation engines and infer the personalization for given users and for their data sets. So for example, if you have a customer base inside Pinpoint, you can bridge those two services together, and by using the Personalize, you can actually feed in data from Pinpoint and build better models that are related with recommendation engines that will be used later in your product. So that's another very good example how to connect those two different, at the first sight, two different worlds together to deliver better outcomes for your users. And here's, for example, a diagram that shows the integration with Amazon Personalize. So you do have Pinpoint as one of the central parts of your system when you do have the omni-channel engagement, and you log all those metrics and events that are coming from the emails, SMSs, push notifications, and so on. They are coming to Pinpoint and then can be saved to Amazon S3 via Kinesis Data Firehose, but also they can be used directly to feed the Amazon Personalize model. And then on an event, which is a time-based, for example, you can schedule a following call. Step function invokes the Amazon Personalize and generates the recommendations. Then you are sending those informations to Lambda, and Lambda triggers Amazon Athena, which triggers Glue, which in the end provides the more information based on the saved data from the events. And this circles back to Amazon Pinpoint, which allows you to store more detailed attributes, and it circles back to Amazon Personalize too, because it allows you to build a better model in the end. Another example how to integrate various services is how to use Amazon Pinpoint inside the process with the Amazon Connect. So you can send the communications and campaigns to multiple endpoints and multiple users, and then based on their responses, like sending SMSs, clicking on the push notifications, you can actually relay some events via SNS to Lambdas, and then schedule a Amazon Connect preemptive call to your user in order to preemptively do a customer support call or schedule surveys and so on and so on. You can also integrate that with Amazon Lex, and that will help you to both answer certain questions and, for example, build FAQs or build the guidelines for your customers and automated responses. So here's another way to close the whole loop of the customer engagement process. Here's a more detailed example related with Amazon Lex, precisely with sending the informations via SMSs and then responding to Pinpoint and to having the integration with the chatbot via SMSs. So you can actually use Amazon Lex as an engine for answering and sending the further questions via SMS channels through Pinpoint, which is pretty awesome and pretty interesting as a service to have, because you can actually relay some additional messages and introduce a feeling of intelligence to your seemingly classic way to interact with your users. Okay, so that's everything what I prepared for today. So I hope you will have some questions right now because I will take a sip and we will wait for a minute. But if no, I hope that it was enjoyable and you learned something. So it's time for questions. I see that the Flashpoint is, I think, satisfied with the answer and knows what to do. So I think that we exploited the topic SNS versus Pinpoint when it comes to the push notifications. So if there are no other questions right now, you can always find me on LinkedIn or on the Slack channels, various ones, especially related with the typical Slack workspace that I'm using, so światchmury.pl. And yeah, if there are no further questions, I will stop here and we will see in 1 week on the last episode of the session about Kinesis video streams, and particular signaling channels inside Kinesis video streams. So 3, 2, 1. Yeah, I don't see any question on the chat. So thank you very much for today. Have a wonderful evening and see you in 1 week. Cheers, goodbye.